Oh,
Hi everyone, Teresa and Sarah are joining you for this week's newsletter. And what we wanted to do for this week is to bring you into conversations we've been having, specifically related to some language that we hear fairly consistently from people in leadership positions. And I want to be really transparent. It's not that we have like the answers to this, but we want to invite you into this conversation and to share with you the ways we've been talking about it, ideas that have come up for us, but we're also curious to hear from you. And so what we'll explore today is the language that sometimes we hear, which is entitlement. That whether that is being frustrated that there are people who feel entitled to promotions, they feel entitled to benefits, right? They feel entitled to things like flexibility at work. And it's something, again, that we hear sort of on a regular, it's not that we hear from everyone, but it does creep in enough that it's given us pause to say, let's explore this and talk about why this language might actually be pretty detrimental to our ability to lead and to make impact. And so, Teresa, what do you want to add as we kind of kick off this topic?
yeah, I think no, I think you did a beautiful job setting it up. I think we've always heard it in our work, but it felt like if it was the word of the month,
Yeah,
that would be it. We heard it so much within over the summer, it seems like. So it felt like, let's hop on and walk through our own thinking about it and invitations for thinking about it. And the first thing that's coming up to me, um, when I've heard this lately, it feels like a permission slip to just kind of write the person off.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
have deemed you
yeah.
entitled,
I'm talking
therefore,
and I grab my
yeah,
book. Yeah,
I have deemed you entitled. So everything you say is too fussy or
yeah,
irrelevant, or,
yeah,
that there would be no value, that I couldn't get curious, right? About help me understand why a promotion would mean so much right now, or help me understand, bring me to where you're at and you're thinking about this. That it was just
yeah.
like
They're
the
they're
old grumpy
entitled.
neighbor,
Yeah.
it's just old so and so, that you're entitled, forget it.
Yeah. And then that's such a great point. And I think that that's one of the watch outs. And, we all can fall into traps where we're labeling, passing judgment in those labels, and not necessarily aware of how the language we use
Mm,
influences how we show up. And that point you made is so important, of what we see with the behavior is a dismissive or an unwillingness to explore and get curious. And I love those questions that you posed, Teresa, from the standpoint of help me understand why the promotion would be important right now to you. Help me understand where you're at in your thinking. And so we'll focus it on this idea of people, the perception of people wanting promotions faster than
mm,
perhaps the manager feels they're ready for. And one of the things that we hear sometimes people talk about and share is particularly related to younger generations. And the language of, we just have to remember that they're the participant badge generation. And I'm going to be really honest, folks, I get prickly with this because as an elder millennial, I've spent the last 15 years having that told about me and our generation. Well, no, I guess you're like, yeah.
Gen X in the
You're a young
house.
Gen X.
Yeah,
But as an elder millennial, right?
an elder
And
millennial.
I embrace that term now. Uh, is Even in that,
Yeah.
there's a bit of a judgment towards the person who was on the receiving end of the parenting that made those decisions,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yes.
or we talk about the impact of helicopter parenting. and
Right.
somehow it's a judgment on the child. And it's
Right.
not the child's fault that they might have a lower level of resilience because they were so protected. And again, I'm
Right.
not here to pass blame. Like, I want to be really clear that it's not like,
Yeah.
well, it's not the kid's fault, it's the parents' fault.
Right.
But sometimes, again, when people are using language like this, it isn't always, it doesn't feel like to me, and I know you feel the same way sometimes,
Yeah.
that it's coming from this place of understanding. Again, it's
Yeah.
coming from this place of labeling, and labels limit people. It limits
Yeah.
the possibilities. It limits how, again, to your point, how we can get curious with them. And while there may be some truth, like, I don't think that there is one thing that can point to why are we maybe noticing an increase of what people might be labeling as an impatience to the
Hmm.
process.
Hmm.
And so you and I've had some conversations that perhaps, individuals who grew up in the culture where we get recognized for doing, for participating, maybe that's a contributor. But there's also other factors we just have to bring into play that are definitely different, not just about younger generation, but all of us.
Hmm.
And, one of the things you and I've talked about is just how the role technology has played
Hmm.
in how that has made all of us, um, or has contributed to, or can contribute to, a level of impatience because we get immediate gratification
Yeah.
all the time. I have a question, I'm unsure, Google it,
Yeah.
or chat GPT it, right? There's
Yeah.
no lingering in the discomfort. Oh, I want to watch the show on demand. I can see it on demand. I don't have to
Yeah.
wait for Thursday night for this show to come on. Even like, oh, I need to go out to the movie theater. Like, well, it's gonna be on my home screen anyway. So like
Yeah.
I can just like, the fact that videos, YouTube, TikTok, all of that are very short content. And so our brains are getting rewired, if you will,
Mm.
like they're getting changed for this instant gratification that I can't help but wonder how that then plays out in other areas of our lives. What's your thinking on that and more,
Yeah.
Teresa?
I mean, we can't underestimate how that kind of immediacy has impacted all of us. The information exchanged at these rates never before seen, right? I'm thinking about two other things. One, the self awareness, and I don't remember if this was Aristotle or Socrates, but one of them, there's this beautiful quote that's like, today's generation is lazy, they don't care, whatever. And this was like thousands of years ago now. So, like, having the self awareness of almost no person sees someone in a different generation as their peer, their
Right.
equal. We're all products of a different snapshot in time, right? And so this is not a new phenomenon, but it's certainly, um, people are certainly behave as though it's a new phenomenon. And, a watch out that's coming up, hearing you describe it, is that confirmation bias,
Yeah.
right? That when I believe you're entitled, my brain will readily accept anything
Mm,
that you're doing as evidence of your entitlement. You want to leave early to see your nephew's game? I never would have
right.
asked to leave early to see my nephew's game. You're going to the doctor during the workday? I never would have went, right?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
all of those moments. And I think, bigger than that, and we see this cross generations, is were those types of working conditions ever appropriate? No.
Yeah.
Did people tolerate them? Yes. Uh, some people had to tolerate them more than others. And the pandemic ushered in or forced us to reconsider a reckoning on values and balance and workplace. So, by no means are uh, younger workers, right? We'll just call them younger people in the workforce. They are not the only ones wrestling with these
Yeah.
same topics. Um, they're just being cast as the only ones wrestling
Right.
with these topics.
Right.
I feel
Right.
like there's something in there that we have to be so mindful of. And I think what's making me smile a little bit, is when I hear people labeling these generations. It like these folks aren't toddlers.
Yeah.
Like they're middle-aged people.
Right.
Like they're 2 feet in adulthood. So
Yeah.
like this isn't because I think the entitlement is often cast as kind of like they're immature, they don't get it
Mhm.
yet,
Mhm.
they're whiny, they're entitled, and we're missing uh, the point. We're missing our ability to connect. I mean, if the
Yeah.
story I'm telling myself is someone feels entitled and doesn't do XYZ, well, why in the world would I reach out, right? It just
Yeah.
reinforces the networks that we already have. So
Yeah.
those were some things coming up for me as I
Well, yeah.
heard you.
Well, and 100%. And the other thing that you and I had some good conversations about that I think is necessary for us to bring in. Well, one, we had talked about the role gamification plays
Oh,
in
sure. Yeah.
changing.
Yeah.
So think about and if you're not familiar with the idea of gamification, but basically any app you engage with, there's some gamification because it's trying to
Yeah.
reward you, to give you that little hit of dopamine so you'll keep using it. For people who use Duolingo, I have an Apple Watch, and it's constantly right now, right? It's telling me, have you hit your exercise rings? Have you hit your standing rings? You're like, oh, and so we Kindles. I get
Yeah.
notifications and badges for, hey, congratulations, you've got 9 days of reading in, right? We are literally
Yeah.
surrounded by rewards and acknowledgement and recognition for little micro milestones. And so
Yeah.
imagine if you are somebody who, like I look at my younger nibblings, and they grew up even more so in an age of video games, even more so in the age of apps, even more so in the age of, right, these, like, we're going to recognize these
Hmm.
milestones in large part because we want you to stay addicted to and keep, like,
Yeah.
like contributing
Yeah. Yep.
to our platform.
Yeah.
But again, there is, and that's not just younger generations. We, as like, who maybe didn't grow up in the time of video games and all of that, we are again exposed to that. But I think an even more important factor, well, I was going to just say the other thing is, because I see this in my nibblings, is that
I don't
access
know
to,
that everyone knows what a
oh, okay,
nibbling
so a
is.
nibbling is, and I yeah, I should, it's my gender neutral term for nephews and nieces. Like siblings, nibblings. It's also, I just think it's cuter, but it's not mine. I got it from my friend Steph, and she got it from someone else. And so yeah, so
Okay.
when I say
Just
nibblings, I
so
don't mean
everyone knows.
like not like food that I'm like developing. Yeah, no, my little nibblings. Um, thank you, Teresa, because it's just so normalized for me.
Yeah.
But their access to information
Mm,
is so different. When I first started in the workforce, I was just happy with whatever money I got and didn't even know, because nobody was talking about minimum wage. Nobody was talking
yeah.
about wage gaps. I didn't know about gender like gaps. I didn't know about, right. I didn't have access
Yeah.
to this, and people have access to way more information, whether it's about
Yeah.
compensation, whether it's about work conditions.
Yeah.
Also, there's such a, we're in this entrepreneurial world right now where people
Yeah.
have access to new ways to make money. And so
Yeah.
they have options they didn't have before. But Teresa, you made a point in a conversation that we had recently about this, of what may feel like entitlement.
Oh,
And you use the word could be coming from a place of desperation, because we know financially
yeah.
things are very different. And I would love to have you expand more on that.
Yeah. This was specifically related to some comments about folks feeling entitled to promotion. And whenever I'm thinking about things, I like to, if I can get my brain to consider, our brains default to binary, right? It's
Mhm.
you're entitled or you're not, you're this or you're
Mm,
that. And so, one tool you can use, and something I do regularly, is if I can think of one other possibility,
mm,
your brain can likely unlock many more, right? It's just
mm.
the act of saying, get out of this lane of thinking, let's see. And what occurred to me was, um, based on things I understand about the economy, what I understand about wage gaps, what I understand about housing market, uh, fill in the gap
Cost of
related
education,
cost of, oh my goodness, yes,
inflation,
student
right? All
loan,
of that.
um, that folks, it is possible there are folks who feel desperate to get a promotion,
Yeah,
that they're in that group of folks who are working full time and still not making ends meet. They've checked all the boxes, they're showing up, they're doing the things that, very respectfully, I say, that previous generations have done and made it, and they're doing those things, and it's not working for them because the world is in a different place. And so
yeah,
that's one tool I use regularly, is think of one other possibility.
mm,
Um, and then your brain will unlock lots of other ones. It's just the magic of shifting out of that kind of like two-way street, I guess. But it wasn't lost on me that someone's insistence, or what might feel like desperation, or haven't you noticed what a good job I'm doing, that might be coming from a very different place than we might
yeah,
assume it is sometimes. And I'm going back to the idea of gamification. And if you're listening and that makes your hair stand up or cringy or whatever, the big idea really is recognition, right? That
yeah,
you're seen and recognized. And I think there are lots of folks who don't want to feel invisible. They haven't
yeah,
felt invisible for a long time, thanks to some of these um, social networks or badges, or all sorts of ways you can interact to be seen. And so, why wouldn't I want to be seen at work? And I think that's another potential reframing of, is it really that they want whatever this entitled version is, it that I this, what I'm spinning on it, or is it really about being seen, being
yeah,
recognized,
yeah,
feeling valued, right? I mean, the way we choose to think about things really matters in these
yeah,
moments. And I don't hear enough curiosity being used. I'm not saying there aren't people who may present as very entitled, but
yeah.
when there's no
Or may,
curiosity,
yeah, or may have a very different perspective of their
yeah,
performance compared
absolutely. Oh,
to, right?
yes, we
Like, I
see
mean,
that regularly.
yes, we do.
Yeah,
Like, I don't need help with this.
yeah,
Like,
yep,
but yeah, I mean, do those situations happen? Certainly.
yeah,
Is that also an opportunity for still curiosity and
yeah,
conversation and clarifying expectations and helping people understand,
yeah,
here's what we expect? Absolutely, right? If there's such a disconnect, how, that tells me also there's not enough conversations happening around rule expectations. There's not
yeah,
enough conversations happening around, here's what it looks like. And I think sometimes, people can get really nervous about saying, well, here's what you need to do to get promoted, because they don't want
right,
it to be a guarantee. And I understand that, having been in
yeah,
management positions, I get that. And right, what are the conversations, and how do we again open up and get curious? And I want to go back to that point you made. We have to understand that even if we do not say this language out loud, how
hmm,
we think about people, how we label them, impacts how we treat them. If
yep,
I've labeled somebody as entitled, I'm likely, even though I might convince myself I'm not, I am treating that person probably differently than people who I wouldn't identify as that.
yeah,
And it is just a beautiful, I think one thing we can think about is that practice of what else might be going on. What other kind
hmm,
of conversations can we have? What, maybe that was very risky. I remember the first time I asked for a raise. It was so terrifying to me. But I also knew that I wouldn't be able to afford a house without it. And the irony was, like, I was asking for another $2,000, which just, but to me felt
yeah,
substantial,
yeah,
and was just,
yeah,
I'm sure my
yeah,
manager was like, you're cute. Okay, that's fine, but like, but how do we be aware of the ways we may be labeling? How
yeah,
might we be aware of the biases we're holding? Maybe the limiting beliefs we're holding about ourselves. I think it's easy for us to go, I was who I was when I was
oh,
18.
yes,
None of us were. But
no,
also, like, recognize that people's experiences are different. I I think about even my experience as an adult. I grew up with the belief that you committed to a company because they would be committed to you. You would have
Mhm.
a pension. They would take care of you and your family. That is what my dad, as a union truck driver working for a company, did. And guess what? Within less than 5 years of my adult career, 2007 financial crisis hit. And I learned very quickly companies were not going to protect their team members. They were going to protect their pocket. And multiple, right? And so you think about younger generations coming in, they have even more history of this instability. They have even more history of seeing the extreme wage gap between
Yeah.
CEOs and frontline, and they're aware of it, and people are talking about it. And that's going to push on
Yeah.
what maybe we're used to or want, because it would be easier. And so how do we just start asking questions differently? So I want to be thoughtful of our time.
Yeah.
This is something we're talking about a lot, but
Mhm.
share with us whether if you want to comment directly in the website on the newsletter, or you can send Teresa and I a message. What other questions should we be thinking about? What else should we be considering? What are we even missing when we think about this conversation? What are things you're learning? Because yeah, when we think about making a really positive impact in the workplace, we have to think about the way our mind and our thoughts is impacting how we show up. So
Absolutely.
final thoughts, Teresa, as we wind down our conversation.
Switch your brain into that other lane of thinking.
Yeah,
Give that a try today.
yeah, that's so great. All right, we look forward to hearing from all of you. Thanks for joining us on, what we're wondering about, and we look forward to hearing from you all. Take care, everyone.